This is the 2025 Nissan Z, which starts at $43,000 and features three very important things for every car enthusiast. First and foremost, as we take a look at the exterior, it features this awesome retro heritage styling that blends elements from other previous generations of Zs, and the minute you see it on the road, it is instantly recognizable as a Z. Secondly, for 2025, Nissan reintroduced Bayside Blue. That is this stunning blue color that harkens back to the R34 GTR. And last but certainly not least, if we go ahead and take a look on the inside, which this one has an awesome blue interior, it's available with a 6-speed manual transmission. And don't worry if that's not for you, they also offer it with a 9-speed automatic.
Under the hood is the VR30 DDTT, a twin-turbocharged 3-liter V6 rated for 400 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque, paired with a 6-speed manual transmission with synchro rev match and featuring an Exity high-performance clutch. There's also an available 9-speed automatic transmission, both of which are paired with a limited-slip differential, sending power to the rear wheels. The Z achieves 0 to 60 in about 4.5 seconds with an electronically limited top speed of 155 miles per hour. For fuel economy, the Nissan Z features an EPA-rated 18 miles per gallon city, 24 miles per gallon highway, and 20 miles per gallon combined, and given the 16.41 gallon fuel tank, provides a combined range of around 328 miles.
Next, let's take a quick look at the exterior of this very rainy Z. Now, this particular Z happens to be the performance trim, which is the upgrade over the standard sport, but it comes with some very critical performance and cosmetic upgrades. Most importantly, back here in the rear, you see this ductile spoiler that goes across the back. It's not just there for looks, it's very important, as supposedly these cars tend to lift, especially in the rear at speed, and so the performance trims actually have a higher electronically limited top speed thanks to this rear spoiler. I believe now it's 155 miles per hour here in the performance trims. Now, looking at the Z as a whole, Nissan tried to give it this very cool retro heritage styling that borrows from all sorts of generations of Zs. And when you look at the side profile of this car in particular, it does look very instantly recognizable as a Z. Another cool introduction for 2025 is some new colors, and this is one of them. This is Bayside Blue, and if you recognize that name, it's essentially a Nissan heritage color that harkens back to the R34 GTR. Now, is it the same paint code? That I don't know, but it's interesting to think about this paint recirculating here, as of course the R34 GTR is now over 25 years old. You're starting to see them get imported to the US, so what a perfect time to bring this color back. Now, as we take a look at the rest of the car, here in the front, this to me looks very 240Z-like. The Nissan Z features LED lighting all around. Here in the front, you have a very sharp nose with a big intake for lots of cooling. I think the higher trim Nismo actually uses a lot of this space for even more cooling, things like oil coolers, transmission coolers, etc. You also have a very aggressive hood there. This reminds me of the Z432, which was a very special high-performance engine version of the early 240Z. As we come around here, you can see these headlights in particular also remind me of the sort of covers that were available on the early 240s. So the front to me all looks very, very 240-like. Moving on underneath, this car of course features fully independent suspension with a double wishbone setup up front and a multi-link setup in back. And Nissan also specifies that it's a sport tune suspension, which to me is kind of like a, well, it better be, because this is in fact a sports car and it's pretty stiff at that, but we'll talk about that more in the driving section. I do want to bring your attention to the wheels and tires. Now, these are actually Ray's wheels that come for the performance trims. You're probably familiar with Ray's. They actually do a variety of manufacturer wheels and are incredibly popular in the aftermarket, and they made these very lightweight but very tough wheels for the Nissan Z, and I think they look great, especially in this darker graphite color to contrast our Bayside Blue. The Nissan Z also gets these very aggressive brakes. You can see they're pretty sizable. I believe they're about 14 inches here in the front with some 4-piston red finished brake calipers, and then you have some 2 pistons in the rear. So those larger brakes will not only help with obviously brake endurance, but also braking performance. You also get a speed sensitive power power steering unit underneath, and just lots of other cool details. As we continue back, the cabin is incredibly sleek on this car. You have these mirrors that have some turn signals integrated. You do get keyless entry, which is done through these physical buttons here on the side of the door handles. And then look at this roofline. You have this nice silver blade, which really contrasts the car. Z badging, these little tiny windows, which I guess are supposed to help with your blind spot, but not really. But then one very, very important detail I want to show you, which is actually on the passenger side. And that is this. This is absolutely huge. This is the gas fill. It's 9.5 inches by 9.5 inches. And if you open it up, look at how tiny the fuel filler is. Now, there is a reason they had to do this, right? They didn't want the fuel door to compromise the styling of the vehicle, but you still have to be able to get the actual nozzle in there. And so they had to leave room to actually get the full nozzle in there to fill up your car. So kind of a interesting quirk of this car. They single-handedly gave it what is quite possibly the largest fuel filler door ever fitted to any production car. Now, coming to the back of the car, there's some more cool details. If you think you recognize the taillights, that's because they are absolutely inspired by the Z32-300ZX. And these things are incredibly sharp, especially at night with the running lights on. They look fantastic. You also get a dual exhaust here down below, which also comes with a diffuser, again, for more aero performance. And then for practicality, here in the back, you go ahead and put your hand in, you can pop the rear hatch, and that gives you access to your rear storage, which, as you can see, is actually accessible from the front seats. So that's a pretty cool thing there. But like other generations of Zs, you do have the chassis reinforcement bar across the back, which can either inhibit you, but does make the car stiffer. So I think it's definitely justified, with plenty of space in the back here for whatever you might need to haul. So next I want to take a look at the interior, which in this car is incredible. It's this two-tone black and blue, and I think it's a great option to have, especially with the Bayside blue. And props to Nissan for having the guts to do something like this. A lot of manufacturers are afraid of doing something that might be this loud, that might be, you know, for the few customers that might want to order it, and would mostly stick to black. But this, I think, is just super cool. Now, the seats in particular, as you take a closer look, you can see they even use a variety of different materials. You have what feels like leather on the outside, Alcantara, and even perforated centers in here, which is all very cool. Lots of side bolstering here and even leg bolstering in the center. And while these are your mechanical fine-tuning adjustments, you do actually have your power controls here in the center, where you can see the forwards and backwards and even the backrest tilt features are all actually integrated in there. Now, there's a variety of other cool features too. Lots of Z badging, including this backlit door sill here. And this car even has the optional puddle light, which is kind of a nice touch. But then there's a lot of creature comforts. I like, for example, how plush this carpet is. It's incredibly cool, branded with the Z logo. The pedals and even the footrests themselves also have a very cool finish to them. As we take a look at the door card, there's some interesting features in here, like the fact that your vents for the side are actually integrated into the doors, which run through the side here. You can see it has a Bose sound system, automatic power windows and power locks. And then what I especially like is right here, you can see there that this surface is actually quite soft, and I personally love to put my elbows here for long rides, and so I love to see this kind of stuff while still getting things like a door pocket with an extra cup holder, because the door itself is a little too high to rest your elbow on, because of course all that safety feature that they integrate, oftentimes these doors are way too tall. Now, with that, let's go ahead and climb in the car, and we can take a look at the other features for everything that's going on. Now, to start the Z, the foot, brake, and clutch both have to be all the way in, and then you can then start it up. Most of the clutch, not so much the brake. That's just really good practice, let's say. You actually get startup animations for both of these here. As you can see, those come on, and of course all of our gauges are currently backlit. It's a little bit in the evening here, and you can see all of the various displays. Now, both digital here in the middle and here in front of you is the driver display, but the driver display for the instrumentation does a good job of trying to come off as an analog display. And one of the other things I like here is the way that Nissan went about integrating and what information they chose to show you. We live in a world where a lot of cars just have dumb gauges that don't provide any actual information, and they went a little bit further with this, and I like to see it. It really feels like a sports car or an enthusiast instrument cluster, which I think is great for this car. Now, over here on the left, you can currently see the boost gauge. Kind of redundant because we have one in the middle here that I'll talk about in a sec, but I'm glad it's there. And as you can see here, you can actually adjust what is on display in this car at the moment. So you have tire pressure, boost, G-force, and you have your settings that you can work through. And so that's kind of an adjustable dial over there in the middle. Your tach's obviously in the center there. You can see all of your range, your fuel filler spread throughout. Above the tach is actually a shift light, which is fun. But then you might notice the 1S. Well, that is actually for the shifter. Now, that is one of my favorite features in modern manuals, to show you what gear you're in case you forget on the highway, you've been cruising for a while, whatever the case is. And you might notice that S as well. That's actually the rev match. So we can actually turn that on or off quite easily in this car with a dedicated button that I will also show you in a sec. Over here on the right side, you can see you have actual numbers for your temperature reading. That is not a common thing in modern cars, but they do give it to you here. And so obviously if you're going to track this car, or maybe you just like to monitor stuff, that is all very much appreciated here in the Nissan Z. Now, moving on to that, if you take a look at the steering wheel itself, it very nicely frames the gauges. Obviously, you have a very comfortable steering wheel. It feels like it's wrapped in leather. You have some nice handholds. It's not too thick or too thin. Your adjustments for your infotainment and everything are over here on the side. And then over here, you actually have your adaptive cruise control and some of your call settings. So you have very nice luxuries as a new car as well. Of course, for your stocks here over on the right, it's actually going to be your wiper. On the left side is going to be your headlight adjustments. And then behind that, I do want to mention the traction control button there. Obviously pretty important as far as these features go for the car. You go ahead and hold that down and you can see in the bottom left there, the traction light actually turns off. Now, moving to the center, there's some really interesting stuff going on here. You actually have some physical gauge pods, but these are not your traditional gauge pods. Notice the one on the left is boost. That's pretty straightforward. You can see you can rev it, moves around. But over here, we also have a turbo speed gauge, which also moves as you rev it. Now, the turbo speed gauge is pretty unique for the Nissan Z. Essentially, what that is it's the readings from a sensor that Nissan has added onto the turbo. Now, normally, when manufacturers are engineering turbos, especially the older turbo systems, they usually have to engineer some sort of safety to prevent something called overspeeding. It's essentially when the turbo starts to run away, if you will, producing too much power, in some instances blowing up the engine, blowing up the turbo, or both, which is not good. This allows them to more accurately measure the turbo's readings, and therefore they can use more of the turbo and run it up right up to that overspeeding limit and monitor it the whole time. So essentially they're improving the turbo's efficiency, and that's what you see there. I don't think they necessarily needed to show you as the driver, but I think it's a cool thing to point out nonetheless. And then over here on the right is your voltage gauge, so it looks like our alternator's running just fine. As we take a look here in the middle, notice your vents in the center are pretty normal here. You have your hazards, you have your main display here, and this is a pretty straightforward display. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. It is, of course, touchscreen, but you can also see there's a variety of physical buttons here, not just for managing things, but of course, also for navigating things quickly. And you also have the camera system. It's pretty straightforward. It also has Alexa built in, so I think it's a pretty intuitive system. It's nothing too crazy, but I also don't think you're so lost in it. Let's be honest. Once you hook up your phone, you're really not going to use anything beyond that. So this system works just fine for that. And of course, run through that Bose sound system, which I think sounds fantastic. As we move below that, you have physical controls here for the AC. This is important, and here's why. Physical controls for things that you're going to want to adjust on a regular basis. You're too hot, too cold, whatever the case is. Maybe you're driving somewhere and all of a sudden it gets hotter. These are the things you always want access to at all times. And so obviously this is quite easy to get access to, and you can quickly adjust that on the fly, and everything has been working great here in the Phoenix summer. Below that, you have a nice little storage cubby, which probably should have had a wireless charger, but you do have some physical chargers over here. Below that, of course, is the shifter for our 6-speed manual transmission, which has some nice short throws to it, easy to use. You don't get lost in the gearbox. Your rev match buttons over here, start stop here. Below that, we have the controls for our heated seats with 2 different settings, so those are pretty straightforward, nice tactile and clicky too. Then you have the hatch pop, which is pretty fun, and then one cup holder is always exposed and the other is kind of hidden here. However, this button also opens up this back hatch. Now first, I also want to mention the fact that you have a physical parking brake in this car, which is just awesome. You don't really see that in modern cars. And don't worry if you thought the storage was a little bit too small. You also have these back cubbies that act as essentially easily accessible storage, if you will, if you wanted to put like a small bag back there, something you need to access to, like a water bottle while driving, but you also have access directly to that rear hatch. So pretty easy, straightforward. You also get a glove box, more of that plush carpet, and then up high is pretty normal. You have things like your pre-settings if you wanted to wire up your either gates or your garages, things like that, your lights, and of course you do actually actually get mirrors in this car as well. So all of that's pretty straightforward. But what I like about this car is the fact that things like this is padded. The floor mats are padded. Your shoulder mounts over here are padded. But then all of your physical displays are angled right at you as the driver. So this feels like a proper driver's car. It doesn't have any features that I would say that I don't need. It's pretty straightforward. It feels pretty luxurious, but having the important stuff like the adaptive cruise control, it makes it easy to even take on long drives. But then the minute you want to have fun, the stuff that you want to mess with, like traction control, either your rev match, whatever the case is, or even a physical parking brake, is all right here. I mean, this is a proper enthusiast car. It doesn't cut any corners for the sake of doing modern car stuff to change the experience. I mean, you can physically change the rev match on and off with a dedicated push of a button. Not all cars do that. They should, but they don't for manual transmissions. And so I think Nissan really knocked it out of the park with this. There's some really awesome stuff. Things like even these blind spot monitors being on the inside of where you should be looking and checking your mirrors, I think is very clever. And it all really just makes sense in here. It's pretty good. Obviously, maybe we would have wanted physical displays for the main instruments, but I will take this, and I think it checks the boxes. So what's it like to drive the Nissan Z? Well, first, let me start by saying I think it's way too quiet. On the inside, there's no like pumped in noise, which yes, is a good thing to some extent, especially if you're probably planning on getting an aftermarket exhaust, but there are certain people in certain places that don't like to modify their cars, or maybe they can't have an exhaust because they live in certain states, California. But if you live in one of those places, then this car might be very, very quiet. There's no option to open up the exhaust or anything like that where it gets a little bit more vocal. And to me, that's kind of sad. Now, I will say this. As you open up the car, it gets a bit more vocal on the inside. You can hear more from the car, which is nice. And in the regular driving instances, let's say commuting, you just really won't hear the car so much. So that's kind of the general experience. Now, of course, we have to talk about the experience from the shifter itself. Now, first, it's a modern manual transmission, and so there's some extra stuff going on that if you're a traditional enthusiast that especially likes older cars, it's obviously going to feel a little bit different from those. But if you're familiar with any modern transmission, I'd say it feels right at home, and in that sense, it's pretty nice. It's pretty good as far as modern transmissions go. It's pretty easy to find the gears. The clutch itself isn't hard to use, that exit clutch. So in terms of all of that, I think it's quite nice. Now, specifically, we should talk about the rev matching instances for this car. I think the rev match is quite good. It does it quite quickly. You don't even have to think about it, and it doesn't feel like it's destroying the driving experience of the car. That being said, if you don't like the rev match, well, fortunately, they made it quite easy to turn off. Some manufacturers bury it in menus. Not here. It's a button right next to the shift. It really doesn't get much easier than that. You also have the shift lights, which come on actually surprisingly pretty early. I would say they come on around $4,000, and as you rev towards the car's red line at 7,000 RPM, that's of course where they start to get yellow, then red. So they come on quite early to start giving you that corner of your eye visible feeling for the car. I will say this, I don't find myself looking at the 3-pod auxiliary gauges so much while driving it, more so just what's directly in front of me on the instrument cluster. So it is kind of nice that they added that redundant boost gauge, because that's what I end up staring at most of the time. As far as visibility goes, let's talk about that. Now, from the back, it's fine as far as a fastback sports car goes. The trade-off is that you can only see lower parts of cars. So oftentimes when somebody's driving behind you, you only see their front grille. If it's like a truck or a taller SUV, you can't actually see over top of it, which I think is kind of funny. You can't see the windshield, for example. Now, the rest of it, the side windows themselves are, of course, quite little, but I've never had any issues interacting with them. The mirrors give me plenty of visibility, and in the windshield, same thing. I feel like I have a ton of visibility out the front of the car, so I've never had any issues with that. The steering, I like the steering. It's not super heavy, but it also doesn't feel numb. Combined with the sport-tuned suspension characteristics of this car, the suspension is quite nice if you're on decent roads. You can feel a lot of the cracks. It feels quite planted. The steering doesn't feel super direct where you really know where they are, but you get the idea of it, and that's really all you can ask for a lot of these modern cars. And so I enjoy those aspects of it. I think it is a fun car to drive in that sense. What's cool is the driver-focused cockpit does give you a very go fast mentality while you're in this car. It feels like the car's catering to you. It feels like it wants to go fast. One thing that is interesting though is despite how kind of wrapped around you it feels at times, it does feel like a little bit of a bigger car, and it is a little on the heavier side. It's still lighter than any of the muscly sports cars that exist, but it is still a little on the heavier side. And funny enough, the Sport being a little bit lighter just kind of makes you wonder. I haven't driven one of those, but I would love to drive a Sport back-to-back with one of these and see if the differences, really justify it. Now, obviously, the performance comes with a lot of upgrades that are definitely desired on this. The top speed one, you wonder if you ever might use, might just come in handy. Worst case, it looks really cool. But of course, the braking upgrades, suspension upgrades, interior upgrades are all very much appreciated here on the performance trims. So that's all pretty interesting. From the outside, I think it can sound kind of good as it starts to rev up a bit. I don't think the engine sounds bad per se, obviously inhibited by the fact that turbos can quiet engines. But man, it's pretty fun, especially getting to see the wide fenders in your rearview mirrors as you're going around the car. You can see the hood bulge on the front through the windshield. It's a pretty nice car, and it's properly quick too. Obviously, with a manual transmission, that won't be nearly as fast as the automatic, and even the automatic gets better fuel economy, which is kind of funny in this day and age. But you get this transmission because it's the one you enjoy. I think this transmission's plenty of fun to enjoy. The way they have it geared, I really don't find myself getting out of fourth most of the time in regular city driving. I mean, if you find a 55 or 60 road, yeah, maybe fifth. But for the most part, I find myself just kind of enjoying shifting through the gears, and the rev match makes it quite easy to do so happily as well without putting in max effort trying to heel it in tow. But honestly, the pedals are pretty close in this car that I have a feeling that if you really wanted to do it, yeah, I would say you could heel in tow. It feels like you can. I'm not going to try it here on the street, but it does feel like it would be quite easy to do it in this car because they did kind of put everything together quite comfortably while still giving you a pedal rest, which is nice for those long road trips. I think this is a pretty nice car. I will say the suspension at times, while it's great in 70-80% conditions of roads, if you're on a particularly rough road, there's a lot of freeways that come to mind, or even just really bumpy roads, this car will throw you around like a rag doll. That is the trade-off of the stiff suspension. Now, the bright side of that means is this is kind of ready to go out of the box to take it to a track day or just drive sportingly in a fun canyon. A lot of the canyon roads that I know of tend to have pretty decent roads, and so I'm not worried about it in that instance. It's just more so the general usability of it that would concern me. From the other side of usability, things like the bucket seats feel like they do hold me in place just fine on twisty roads like this, but they're not so aggressive that they make it unusable as a street car where you get tired of getting in and out of the car. You know what I'm talking about if you've ever had aftermarket bucket seats in your car. But I don't know, I like this car. I think it's pretty good. I understand why the sales are improving. I think the word of mouth is getting better for these cars. Obviously, there's also a lot of sales incentives out for these cars currently. Even on Nissan's website, they'll tell you, hey, if there's a 2024 Nissan Z on the lot, we'll cut you a killer deal on it. And I say, why not? Now, in my personal experience, I have gone shopping around looking to see what Zs are available. I saw some Heritages and I saw some 2024 Sports. I did not see any performances from 2024 sitting on lots anywhere. You might be able to find one if you look in, let's say, more remote areas, but I couldn't find any in Phoenix, which probably, I think, speaks volumes again about the upgrades in terms of maybe what trim might be right for you. I would say check out the Sport because, after all, you know, a good, fun sports car bargain's a sports car bargain, especially if you think you might start modifying a bunch of stuff anyways, and maybe some of the luxuries aren't really for you, then I think the Sport makes total sense. The performance, though, has a lot to offer. This is a car that you know you're going to keep and love for maybe the rest of your life. I'd say you should go with a performance trim. I mean, why not? Get all the right proper options, which obviously isn't going to hurt the value of the car by any means, and just make it more enjoyable. So with that, that's a quick look at the Nissan Z. I think the interior is quite comfortable, obviously driver focused. While it doesn't come off as a perfect car by any means, I think it is a special car. And I think with time, this car proves it. 2025, obviously these have been out for a little while now. I think they were introduced in 2023. I want to say. And so these cars have been out for a little while now, and the more that Nissan has time to refine them, add new colors and options, I think they're honing in and they're really starting to perfect this more so as an enthusiast car, giving us the stuff we really want. The cosmetic options, while it seems like a silly thing, does go a long way, right? Having those heritage colors. When we look back on the R34 GTR, for example, Bayside Blue is iconic, obviously also from Fast and Furious, but people also love Midnight Purple, and then they also love Millennium Jade. I mean, could you imagine if Nissan was to bring those colors back for this car? That would do wonders, I think, for this market as a whole. So Nissan, I think, is on the right path with this car. It still needs some fine-tuning adjustments. The interior, I think, is pretty well sorted. It's nice on the inside. The soft touch pieces especially are very, very important to me. I drive a lot of cars on road trips. Having comfortable places to put my elbows is great. And then when you're driving sportily, the steering wheel is so comfortable and the bucket seats hold you in place. This checks boxes for me. And if you're interested in one, you should go drive one for good reasons. I think these are quite popular cars. They look cool, the styling is fantastic, and they just are such fun cars to own. They get so many looks, especially when you order one in Bayside Blue with a blue interior with either an automatic or a manual transmission. So with that, that's the end of the video. Let me know what your thoughts are on the Nissan Z down below. And of course, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that and could leave me a thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. And consider getting subscribed for more content like this in the future. With that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.